My name is Tom. I come to you from the Rustic log cabin in Northern Maine. Welcome to my cabin this morning. Get yourself a cup of coffee. The sun is behind a cloud right now. It's gonna be a great day. You can see we're in on the new cabin. This is the outpost that I've been working on this summer. I finally have got all of my lumber here, so we're moving right along. The framework's in the background. But anyways, what I want to talk about today, it was about pads and post. Pads and post have seemed to have gotten a lot of attention with this cabin build from the different questions and stuff like that. Now I have been, like I said in several of these videos now, I'm a retired carpenter, builder. Worked on every kind of cabin you can imagine, shape, size, style, you name it, I built it. The same thing with underpinning and pads and posts. I've changed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pads and posts under cabins in the 35 to 40 years that I was doing that kind of work. Jacking, leveling of cabins in my area. There's a lake on every corner. There's probably, within 10-minute ride of my driveway is probably a dozen boat landings on different lakes where I live. So that was one of the things that got me into cabin work way back then. So, but anyways, getting back to these posts. What's important about a post under the cabin? I have tried just about everything under cabins, and most people go way too small when it comes to putting in pads and all of that. And it's because it's easier, that's all. And I'm only talking here, I don't even know what you guys have for pads in other states or other countries. But in this state, you can get your hands on to an 18-inch round cement pad, and you can get your hands on a 24-inch round cement pad. When I started this, I started doing this stuff when I was 19 years old. When I started back then, I would make my own pads, and I would make square ones, 2 feet by 2 feet or whatever, 18 by 18. But they didn't seem to hold very good. Now, I don't have the answer for this. The only thing I can tell you is, for whatever reason, the round pads sit still better. Take from that what you want. I don't know the answer to why. That's why I stopped using the square pads 30 years ago. They didn't, and these round pads really hold. When you're putting in a post, you really want, if you've got the luxury of getting in there with equipment, you really want to put in 16 to 24 inches of good clean gravel. That's the Cadillac of setting that post or setting that pad. Now, if you don't have that, don't get all nerved up about it. It's not gonna be a big deal. You can put it right straight on the ground. It just means you're going to have to adjust it more. Now, I want to talk about the pad itself. Make sure when you make the landing for it, make sure it's level and pound it down. If you can compact it, even better. But if there's a big rock or a piece of wood, anything in your way, get it out of there, especially if it's a rock. Rocks have a tendency, when the frost pushes them up, sometimes they won't go back down. So if you notice a big rock under your cement pad that you're going to lay it, try to get that out of there and fill that hole in with some good gravel, or just level it up so that it's not setting on a rock that's completely on one side of the pad. Because what will happen is that rock will push up and it will tilt your pad. And then and sometimes it won't come back, so you'll have to adjust that post and pad in the springtime. So make sure your pad is level to start out with in the corner. And then, now I know it's going to sound foolish, I'm not a big fan of pressure treated lumber. That's all I'm going to say. Because I've replaced, now I guess it's not all I'm going to say. I've replaced as much pressure treated post as I have anything else. And some of the stuff that I replaced was 100 years old or more. I've worked on houses, homesteads that was 200 years old, taking out hemlock posts and hemlock beams that have been in there for 200 years. I don't believe there's a piece of pressure treated that will last 200 years. It's because they make it out of crappy wood. The cores aren't pressure treated. If you whack off a 8-inch by 8-inch pressure treated beam, there's no pressure treated in the center, and it's crappy wood to boot. That's why it goes into the pressure treated pile. I use all hemlock. Well, what I do is on the bottom of that pressure treated post, I treat the bottom of it, and I treat it with motor oil and kerosene. 2 parts motor oil to 1 part kerosene. Quart of motor oil, half a quart of kerosene mixed up in a paint can. And then what I'll do with that post is I'll paint the bottom of it with a paintbrush, because water will not penetrate oil, period. The kerosene is to cut the oil so that the oil will absorb into the bottom of the post. That's all the kerosene is for. It'll absorb into the bottom of the post. And then when you set your pad, now you can go one step further. You can take 2 kitchen sponges, 3 inches by 4 inches, and you can fill those up with kerosene and motor oil. And when you place your post, place it on top of those sponges, 2 sponges, because like I said, water won't penetrate oil. The 2 sponges is going to make sure that there's a lot of oil down there and a lot of kerosene, so that the bottom of that post really gets sucked up with kerosene and motor oil. That post is going to last now. What happens is water comes down and hits the pad, runs underneath the post, and then the post acts like a sponge itself and sucks up the water, and that's what causes it to rot. So by having that coated with oil and having a sponge under there, it's not going to happen. And then when everything dries out, what I do is I paint the post itself, the pressure treated post. This is on my buildings, because customers sometimes will listen, sometimes they don't. When it comes to an old school trick like that, I don't argue the point with anybody. I know it works, but sometimes with customers, you kind of got to go along with what everybody else is thinking. And everybody else is thinking pressure treated, pressure treated, pressure treated. What are you going to say? Otherwise, and if you start going off on something like this, you never get the job. Period. They move on because they know what they see on TV, they know what they hear, and they know, it poured here last night, and if you look at my post, you can see where the water is climbing up the post. Roughly about 1.5 inches. So that's water moisture that's absorbed into that post. So by treating that post with used motor oil and kerosene, that's not going to be an issue.
This right here is motor oil and kerosene. Before I put my wall boards on, I'm going to treat this sill to keep it from rotting out.
And the same thing with the ends of the sill. I'm going to paint the ends of the two sills that are on this cabin, because they hang down lower than the siding. My siding, which is them 1-inch boards, will come down an inch below the floor joist. So that leaves 5 inches of the sill exposed. And I don't want any moisture creeping, that 1 inch that's covered, I don't want any moisture creeping in there, because that's how sills rot out, from the ends in, or if they're sitting on the ground, or around doorways, all that stuff that allows water come down the building, seep into your sill, and now your sill rots out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the ends of my sill with the kerosene and motor oil. I'm also going to paint the sill in the door area, top and bottom, because of the same deal there. That's the weak link in these buildings, is wherever water can pool up and set in an area, that's what rots out your building. And like I said earlier in these videos, I want this building, I'm building a 100-year camp here. I'm building something that I want this thing to stand for 100 years for my family, so they can continue to use this lot. This whole deal is about grandkids and future family members that aren't even born yet. So that's what this whole thing is about, is I'm trying to set up their future so that they will have a place to not only hunt and fish, but to obtain food. We live in a crazy time right now. So who knows? I'm planning ahead for the future. I'm going to be fine. I'm not, I've got more stores, and I've got 50 years of experience of living off the land as far as hunting, fishing, and all of that stuff. So I'm not too concerned about that. But if if things don't get any better, food shortages could be a real deal in this country in the near future. That's just the way it is. Somehow I got off on a tangent there. Sorry about that. Maybe that means it's time for a cup of coffee. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Really. I lost where I was headed. Okay. So now we've taken care of the pad. The pad's nice and level. We've taken care of the post, so the post doesn't rot out. The other thing that really saves these cabins is and I'm a big, get it off the ground. You want airflow underneath that cabin. 16 inches to 24 inches off the ground. That does a lot of things for you. It makes them easier to jack up. If you're hiring somebody to come in and jack your cabin, it's cheaper, because they can crawl under there, they can get their jacks into place, and boom, it's just a faster, cheaper job. If you build them real low to the ground, then it's almost impossible to get your jacks under them. Now, I have special jacks. I only take 4 inches. But if you've got to dig down a foot, put a pad down there, and then start jacking, the cost goes up. So make them 16 to 24 inches off the ground. I want to wrap this up. And then make sure to put a pressure-treated brace on all of your posts. If it's in the corner, go both directions. And don't just nail them. Pre-drill your braces so you don't split them, and then use a lag screw. A lag screw or a torque screw to screw that post to the building, and to screw the bracing, to the building, and then to screw the bracing to the post. If you do that, and on both sides of the post, don't cheat. If you do that, when the building moves around in the wintertime, the post will stay still. And because the post stays still, when it almost forces the pad back into place in the springtime after the frost goes out of the ground. So make sure to use a pressure-treated brace with the torque screws and screw it. Don't nail it. Even the ring shank nails, even the spiral nails, are good, your good spikes. Don't use that. Use a torque screw, because that's what it's going to take to keep that post in place. especially on these smaller buildings, real easy to do. I put bracing on even posts as long as I can get to that post. Anything over a foot tall, I would try to get bracing on, even if it's only 4 inches. And my bracing, depending on the height of the post, is usually half the distance of the post. Say I've got a 32-inch post, then I have a 16-inch brace. If I have a 2-foot post, then I would probably do the same thing on even on a not a 12, on a 24-inch post. I would probably go 16 on that as well, just because it's going to hold it better. So, but make sure to brace your post, get them on square to start, pads level, and they'll sit there a whole lot longer. So if you like this video today, subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, hit that notification bell, throw me a bone, help me out on these videos, and I will see you in the next one.